All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a really simple budget and resolution and then mess with your categories and your allocations of money in said budget. So, as you are probably aware, this is what resolution looks like right now when you start up. Very simple, nothing really here. One is one. Let's make it something. So, we'll start off. We're going to say this is our total budget, and I'm going to assign a unit that I made called budget. And one quick note on this. I've got two kinds of basically money. I have budget and I have revenue. And the reason I did that is that I'm going to turn one of these things into another kind of thing. And so in resolution, it's really useful. We call it units. We may not call it that forever, but it's more than units, right? Because unit would just be dollar. But in this case, what we really mean is a certain kind of dollar. So money you can spend on a budget is a fundamentally different thing than revenue you get from customers. In fact, you spend money from a budget to make revenue from customers. So whenever you can make that distinction in resolution, it helps to make it. And you can label it under description and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is actually new cash in the door. And this is budget. So that when you go here, you can say money we can spend. Okay, great. So let's do that. We're also going to use the min-max here to say this budget is not going to be, in fact, let's set it first. Let's set it to, I don't know, $1 million, right? That's cool. Let's do that. And then we're going to go back and say, all right, and it's never going to be less than 500,000, and it's never going to be more than 5 million. And now I've got a good little baseline here. This will tell you. So when you make changes to other things in the budget, it's going to stop you if you try to create this budget lower than 500 or 500K or higher than 5 million. Great. We'll leave it locked for now, just so the numbers don't get crazy, and we're going to make some subcategories. So the first thing we're going to do is keep it really simple and think, well, what do I use this budget for? This is my company budget. There's really, let's say, two kinds of things, right? And one is going to be growth, and one is going to be what the growth people call not growth, but we're going to call it operations. And our business can basically be broken up into these two categories. Now, this is not granular enough to really map the business, but all right off the bat, this is kind of what we're looking at. And you'll see here, these are conversions because we have not said this is 500,000 what? We haven't said that. So it's like, well, look, you give me a conversion rate from budget to nothing. We don't want to have a conversion because this is the same type of thing. We're just breaking this budget up into piles. So these conversions are going to go away when we assign that budget unit to these amounts because that tells resolution, oh, okay, we're just making piles. Cool. Nothing is actually happening. We're not turning anything into anything else. It's just piles. All right, that's great. And now we're going to make some subcategories. So we can go down here and say, well, we can do as many as we want. And we could change our mind and say, well, there's actually another one. Let's call this sales. I know what you're going to say, but give me a second. We can all laugh at this together. And then we're going to get rid of this one. And we're going to say, okay, and this is going to be the marketing department budget. And it's going to be budget. Great. And then you go, wait a minute. Oh, no, this is sales. This belongs in growth. So I guess I got to delete. No. You just go over here to this little bar. And you grab it. And you drag it. And you can either put it here next to marketing. Or here as a sort of child of growth. Now look at that. It does it for you, tells you how it's going to make the numbers work. And you say, great, cool, done. All right, and now over here, we're going to need some more. So I'm tired of making new boxes and assigning budgets to them. So I'm going to use that same little handle. And I'm going to hold down the Option or the Alt key, depending on what kind of keyboard you have. And I'm going to drag this while holding that down. It's going to work the exact same way, except instead of moving it, it's going to make a copy. Great. And we'll do one more. Great. Now, this isn't actually sales. This is going to be administrative costs. Nice little vague slush fund for us. And this is going to be R&D, also vague. And there you go. We just made a really rough budget that stays together. And so we can either say, look, let's unlock this. Let's unlock it and be open to anything and say, look, the R&D guys, they're going to need more. Okay? We can do that by cutting everybody else's budget a little bit and increasing the budget to ops and thus R&D. Or we can say, no, leave growth alone. You're going to have to increase the total budget. See that change? To make this work. Okay, great. I'm going to unlock these again, although we'll leave these guys at 500. And then we say, all right, marketing, well, this isn't going to work. We don't want this ratio. This is too much money to marketing. Sorry, too much money to sales, not enough money to marketing. We want to flip this. This is our big executive goal is to flip this. So instead of assigning specific values, we're going to click on sales, and we're actually going to say, oops, no, that's fine. Don't worry about that. We're going to go here and say, I want this as a percentage. And I also want this as a percentage. Now, what's funny is you can also just pick to have one of these as a percentage. There are reasons you might want to do that. But in this case, we're going to have them both as percentages. So when I edit these values now, it's not asking me for a number. It's asking me for a percentage. And I'm going to say, I want a 60-40 split. I want 60% of my budget and growth to go to marketing. Great, cool. One thing to note, when you lock these, you're not locking the percentage, though. You're locking the actual dollar value. No big deal. So there you go. So we're doing all of this, and you basically are able to have a budget. And if you decide that there's a third leg of the business you didn't think of, maybe you don't want to include, I don't know, I'm going to make something silly up, but legal. We're not going to put legal in operations because this is a very highly regulated industry. So we actually have some subgroups we want to do with legal too. So instead of making a bunch of new boxes, you can actually go to this one here, which allows you to move an entire branch. So it's going to take growth and the two things below it, and we're going to move it over here, and it's going to flip them. So now growth over here and operations over here. That's just cosmetic. Or you can, again, hold Option or Alt, do the same thing, and now you're going to get a copy of that whole tree. So we can say, oh, good. Now we have a place to put our legal department. We're going to say legal. And our two categories will be suing people and getting sued. Great. And we're going to do legal and legal alone as a percentage because we really want to keep an eye on that percentage of our costs and say, let's not have this over a quarter, change it to a quarter. Great. Excellent. Now, when we up our whole budget by $1 million, stuff will go up. Oh, legal's locked. Let's unlock legal. And we'll allow them to maintain that 25%. And everything gets to go up. Great. Let's do a little more. Feeling generous. There you go. That's our budget. So note with this sort of allocation exercise, which is pretty useful because you can come in here and put in specific values and see what happens to everything. You can treat things as percentages or not percentages. But we're dealing with one unit. Everything is budget. And what's fun about resolution is that you can also come out here and say, well, you know what? We also want to make stuff. And so we say, okay, well, let's take the budget for R&D and say it drives two things. One, it drives researchers, okay, who are people. And then it also drives programs, okay, which would be experiments. Now, in this case, before I do this, I'm actually going to say, you know what? Here's a little resolution best practice for you. You can go directly from this budget to people and this budget to experiments. But when you break something up into piles, it's usually smart to say, you know what? Let's keep the unit the same first. Let's make a program's budget, and let's make a people budget, okay? And now we're going to do this again, and we're going to say this is going to be the actual program's run. And we made a unit called experiments because it's R&D. It even has a little microscope. And then we're going to figure that cost out in a minute. And then we're going to say, and this is going to be research team. It is going to consist of a certain number of people. And there you go. And so this just keeps it clean, the breakdown between the money spent on programs and the money spent on researchers. So this is just a general best practice I like to do. Don't go from one unit breaking down into two different units. It's just you can do it. The system will do it, but it just takes some of the allocation and puts it behind the scenes so you can't see it anymore. So now our next step is to figure out the cost of these things because we're now going for the first time from budget to something else. So we're going to keep these conversions. And if we click on this one, the question becomes, for every dollar spent on a program, how many actual programs, how many experiments do we get? And what we want to say is it's going to take, I don't know, $10,000 to do one experiment. And so that'll work. Notice it took all the money out of everything it could and put it in R&D. Don't do that. Keep the budget the same. Click the lock button, and it does that. And it says, okay, here you go. This is, you can run 46 programs with that. And we can call this, experiment cost. And we can mess with that cost. Another thing you can do is format this conversion to look a certain way. So if you go over here, right, you got a bunch of these different options. You can display it as a ratio, as a percentage, as a multiplier, and all these they all work the same way. They just look different. But what can be confusing is if you go to this multiplier, you say, okay, it says 0.001, and you're like, no, I just want the price of an experiment. It can't be. It's actually the opposite. Yes, it is the opposite. What it's doing is it's taking this ratio, right, and it's turning it into just a multiplier. But you want to think about it the other way. You actually want to swap the way the ratio is visualized. There's a button for that. It's this guy right here. And I explain this just because this confuses people sometimes. But if you go in here, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, for every experiment, the arrow points up because we're taking that, and this is the multiplier. It's going to be 46 times the 10,000. Again, this is all rounded roughly, right? 45.7. And we're going to get roughly this. Okay, so that's why that arrow works and makes sense. If it was going the other way, you'd say, okay, for every dollar spent in programs, how many experiments do you get? Well, you actually get 0.0001. That's how you get this number. So this is simply a display option that helps this look the way that it should for you, but it's there and it's nice to use. So if you ever get a really funny looking conversion that doesn't seem right, it may be because of that. So let's do the same thing over here and say average compensation for our researchers. You don't really have I've built a lot of research teams, so I'm going to assume this is a lot. And again, sucked in the whole budget, but say, no, don't do that. There you go. I really only want 3 people. I don't need tons of people. And then you're good. You've got your costs for these things, and you've got this thing figured out. And you can repeat this and do completely different things for other parts of the model. So, you could say, go down here and say, this budget is, actually, let me get rid of this one and say, we'll drag this one over here and say, okay, well, we're also going to do people, but they're not researchers. They're marketers. Marketeers. No, marketers. So marketing budget, which leads to a certain amount of, now I can say marketeers, right? Is that cool? Does anyone care? Those are people. You do the same sort of thing where we flip this conversion and say average compensation. Okay, that compensation is actually an X thing, and it's going to be probably less than a researcher. We're going to lock that budget to get a reasonable number in here. Great. Fantastic. Okay. And then you're also going to have, let's call this the marketer's budget. And then you're also going to have advertising. Budget. And what we're doing is we're making, just like programs, we're making a pile for marketers, right? And this time, we're going to you could get crazy with it, right? You could get out here and say, well, we're going to do, Facebook, and we're going to do, I don't know, TikTok. I don't know what this company sells. But this is all going to go under budget. So now we're going a little further with the budget, which you can do. And you can say, okay, this is how we're going to do this. And then we're going to do, ultimately, the purpose of this is to generate leads. I believe we have a leads unit already built. Great. And we're going to generate leads for TikTok. Also leads. And we're going to say cost per lead. We'll do this ratio thing. Okay, flip our conversion just like before. Say that cost per lead is $12. That is the wrong way. Oops, flip it. $12. There you go. No. I did exactly what I didn't mean to do. Flip it. There you go. See, even I'm learning. Okay. And then you're going to say cost per lead over here is going to be, say it's more. Make it an X. You can also leave these as ratios if you find the conversion flipping thing annoying, which I totally get. But wow, look at all these numbers that got all changed. Okay. So let's go back and say, listen, give me some budget, man. I need a team. I could have locked these while I was changing things, but I didn't do that. And so it said, all right, fine. And the same thing too, you could also set this to be like a min-max thing where you could say, listen, we have got to have at least 2 marketers. And then it's not going to let that drop below 2, which means it's not going to let you spend less than $150,000 on the marketer budget. In fact, let's do that right now and see what it says. No, cannot do that. Right? Okay, great. Never mind. Leave it alone. So then we can go here and we can do the percentage game we like to play and set these to percentages because we're going to figure out how much money to spend on these things. And we're going to say maybe we should spend, I don't know, 35% on Facebook. Cool. And what you can do, I won't get into it here, but you could obviously follow leads all the way down and say, well, what are the conversion rate from lead to opportunity and all this stuff per channel? And you could actually see revenue. And you can say, well, look, this is how much money we can get on this side of things. If we are to cut the advertising budget by a certain amount of money, this is the actual impact on the business. And you can have these unique funnels set up for all the different parts of your business. And there you go. Very quickly, we're starting to have a budget that isn't just a budget, but actually breaks down the impact of that budget on different aspects of the business. You can do this for a department, for a company, for an effort, for a project. It's actually pretty easy. And I will say that probably the best part of this is cool to have, and I enjoyed building this. But I think the process of building it out is a really good way to force yourself to think about, what is the purpose of this money? What's the right way to organize it? Did we forget anything? Legal department. And, how are we going to sort of square the circle? So there you go. That's building a budget in Resolution very quickly. I hope you enjoy it. And, good luck.